The LA Kings get set to take on their old coach in Motown. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. I'm also host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years. New episode out today. And a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make your play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the Kings are back in action tonight, or this evening, I guess, LA time. Game number 47 on the NHL season. The Kings have played the fewest games of any team in the NHL at this point. It's also game number 2 of the Kings' current 5-game road trip. Tonight, the Kings are in Detroit to face former head coach Todd McLellan and the Red Wings. McLellan took over in Detroit for the fired Derek Lalonde. He's been on the job for 15 games, and the team has done pretty well under him at 10-4-1. As far as the Red Wings organization, as far as the team, are they going to have any extra motivation to try and get a win for their new head coach tonight against the team that fired him last year? Well, maybe a little bit. I'm sure the Red Wings players are smart enough to understand the situation, and it might provide them a little extra motivation to win one for their new coach. Will Todd McLellan have some extra motivation to beat the organization that fired him? I'm sure a win over the Kings tonight would make him smile maybe a little bit more than a win over the Ducks or the Sharks. Does the fact that Todd McLellan coached the Kings last season give Detroit any kind of tactical advantage? I would seriously doubt it. This Kings team isn't exactly the same team that McLellan coached last year. Certainly they're playing a bit of a different style, certainly some different personnel on this team. Of course, he does know some of the Kings players that played under him, what their strengths and weaknesses might be. But as far as the matchup and could that little bit of insight tip the scales in the favor of the Red Wings, I would doubt it. I mean, every team has their scouting reports on every opponent. Every team is, well versed on what the opponent does well, doesn't do well, what individual players to look out for, that kind of thing. So do the Kings and Jim Hiller have any kind of tactical advantage going up against a Todd McLellan coach team? Obviously, Hiller coached under McLellan, so he knows and understands what McLellan likes to do, what his tendencies are, things like that. And you could certainly say, well, McLellan knows Hiller because he was an assistant coach for him, but he doesn't really know Jim Hiller as a head coach. He knows what he did as an assistant coach. So all in all, I don't think that either, familiarity with the coaching staff on both sides is going to have any real impact on this game. I think it does make for a fun storyline for people like me to talk about, but I don't think there's much of a chance that, the Kings facing their old coach is really going to factor much into tonight's game, other than maybe make it a little bit more of a motivation, maybe a little bit more for the Red Wings. For McLellan, he did talk to the media earlier today, said that facing the Kings will be a bit weird, but that he does have some experience in that situation because this is now his 4th different head coaching stop, and he's obviously faced his old teams before when he was the coach of a new team. He had an interesting analogy. He said it's like being part of a family, and then suddenly you leave the family, and then you see them out at another place. He said it feels weird, but he also said that's sports. As for the matchup tonight, Jim Hiller's LA Kings check in with a record of 26-14-6. The Kings are 3rd in the Pacific Division, 7th in the Western Conference, and 12th in the NHL with 58 points in 46 games. Kings are coming off a hard-fought 3-2 overtime loss in Columbus on Saturday, opening up this 5-game road trip. Kings are 11-11-5 on the road this season. Todd McLellan's Detroit Red Wings are 23-21-5. Red Wings are 7th in the Atlantic Division, 12th in the Eastern Conference, 21st in the NHL. They've got 51 points in 49 games and trying to get back in the wild card race in the Eastern Conference. Detroit's last game was Saturday night against Tampa Bay, a 2-0 home shutout against a pretty good Lightning team. Red Wings are 14-11-2 on home ice so far this season. Kings are led by Adrian Kempe in points and goals. Kempe with 44 points and 24 goals on the season. The Red Wings are led by Lucas Raymond, who has 52 points. Their leading goal scorer is Captain Dylan Larkin, who has 21. Kings are expected to start Darcy Kemper in net tonight. He checks in with a record of 14-4-6, a 2.09 goals against average. That's third best in the NHL, and a .922 save percentage, fourth best in the National Hockey League. He did allow 3 goals in that 3-2 overtime loss to Columbus. This will be the first time that Kemper has faced Detroit this season. David Riddick was in net in the first meeting between the Kings and the Red Wings in LA. That was a 4-1 Kings victory. Kemper has been pretty good on the road so far this season. As for the Red Wings, looks like they're going to go with another familiar face, and that is former Kings netminder, the veteran Cam Talbot. He checks in with an overall record on the season of 13-10-2. He's got a 2.90 goals against average and a .906 save percentage, but he has been on fire of late, at least as far as the record goes. Now, he was winless in 5 starts in December, but he is 7-1 in the month of January. His home record, 9-6-1, 2.84 goals against average and a .906 save percentage. He is riding a 5-game home ice winning streak, although his goals against average and his save percentage are pretty much the same as they have been all season. So translation, it looks like the Red Wings have been a better offensive team and giving him better support lately, which is why the record has been so good. He, again, was in net in the Lightning's last victory. That was that 2-0 shutout against Tampa Bay. He had 28 saves for his second shutout of the season. He was also in net in the first meeting between the Red Wings and Kings, and that was a loss for him and for Detroit when he allowed 3 goals on 40 shots. Checking the team numbers in this one, the rankings, as far as the important statistics, Kings check in 20th in the league in average goals scored per game at 2.89. That has steadily been going down and down over the last couple of weeks. Detroit is 22nd in the NHL, scoring 2.8 goals per game. The Kings are 4th in the NHL in average goals allowed per game, 2.46. Red Wings are 23rd in the league, allowing 3.14 goals per game. The Kings' power play is still 28th in the NHL at 16.1%. Detroit's 5th best power play in the National Hockey League at 27.7%. The Kings have the 6th best penalty kill in the NHL at 82.2%. Detroit's penalty kill is second to last in the NHL, 31%. They are killing off 69.4 of the power plays against them. As far as injuries go, defenseman Drew Doughty remains close to returning, but not expected to play tonight. Not that this is necessarily news to us, but I did see a post today on social media where NHL national reporter Darren Dreger from TSN in Canada, one of the more plugged-in reporters in the NHL, said on social media, quote, Drew Doughty is expected to return to the Kings in the next 3 to 5 games, end quote. I think it'll be sooner than that. I think he will play either Wednesday in Florida or Thursday in Tampa Bay. That is not from any inside sources I have. That's just my own opinion. Hearing what Drew has had to say, seeing where he is on the ice, I think he'll be back in one of those 2 games coming up back-to-back in Florida. But we shall see. As for the Red Wings on the injury report, Todd McLellan said the team is, quote, dinged up, end quote. Forward JT Compher is injured and will not play. Took a big hit in their last game against Tampa Bay. Forward Vladimir Tarasenko is apparently suffering some kind of an illness and is not expected to play tonight. Forward Patrick Kane, also veteran, former Chicago Blackhawk Cup winner, day-to-day, also not expected to play tonight with an injury. Forward Michael Rasmussen, who left Saturday's game with an injury, is expected to play tonight for Detroit. Now, the Kings, when you look at the seasons for both the Kings and the Red Wings, Kings have been very consistent all year, excellent at home, 500 on the road. They have only lost 3 games in a row once this season. For the Red Wings, they started off okay, 10-10-2, but then had a stretch of where they went 3-8-2, and that culminated in the firing of their head coach Derek Lalonde and the hiring of Todd McLellan. Since T-Mac lost his first game, then went on a 7-game winning streak. The Red Wings since then have gone 3-1, but overall they've been better with Todd McLellan as their head coach. Up next, we're going to talk about the Kings' keys to victory and some players in the spotlight tonight. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the final touch or the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all through the game. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl is obviously a lot of fun. It's the icing on the cake. It's the Super Bowl coming up. It's the rematch from a couple years ago. Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Chiefs looking to three-peat. They're listed as a point and a half favorite. Over-under is at 49.5. Download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, the LA Kings getting set to take on the Detroit Red Wings tonight. That's a 4 p.m. face-off LA time. Want to talk about some keys to victory for the Kings in this one. And my number one key to victory is hit the gas in Motown, get off to a good start. The times the Kings have gotten themselves in trouble of late against the Penguins, against the Kraken, they started slow, but usually when the Kings start strong, they're in the game throughout. So let's get off to a good start in Detroit tonight. Have the energy there, ready to go right from the opening faceoff, as they did in the opening game of the road trip in Columbus. My number two key to victory is someone help Juice. Let's get some secondary scoring. Adrian Kempe has been carrying the load, but he can't do it all by himself, as we saw in the last game against Columbus. We've seen a few other guys chip in with some secondary scoring. Samuel Hellenius had a goal in a win recently. Philip Deneau, nice to see him get on the board in that loss against the Blue Jackets. But who will step up rather than the usual suspects? And number three, be on your best behavior. Stay out of the penalty box. Detroit, a top 5 power play, but the Kings have a top 5 penalty kill. So it is strength on strength in that regard. However, the best way to prevent another team's power play from beating you is to not give them many or any power play chances. So stay out of the penalty box if you can tonight for the LA Kings. As for the projected lineup for the Kings, would expect it to be the same as it was in their last couple of games. Jim Hiller going to the 12-6 setup, 12 forwards and 6 defensemen, which we've seen over the last 2 games. So not expected to see any lineup changes tonight for the LA Kings. As for some individual players, of course, the goaltender, always important. Darcy Kemper has been amazing this month, but is coming off for him a bit of a subpar game against the Blue Jackets, where he allowed 3 goals, and 2 of those goals were a little bit questionable. He certainly has been under a tremendous amount of pressure to perform, with LA's offense going a bit cold of late. And for the most part, he has delivered. So hopefully we can see him kind of get back on his game tonight, even though it's been at an incredible level. And you can't expect him to do that every night. But hopefully he can be back to the Darcy Kemper we've seen most of the year and kind of on top of his game. As for the offense, Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, the usual suspects, those are your top 2 goal scorers. So certainly you're looking for those 2 guys to kind of lead the way. And both of them, I thought, had some really quality chances in the game against Columbus. Unfortunately, coming up a little bit short on that one, but hopefully those chances and their aggressiveness and those opportunities can continue for them tonight so they can get a goal or 2. Andrei Kopitar has certainly gotten his assists of late, but has not lit the lamp so far in the month of January. For the Kings captain, 10 goals, 10 games this month, and still looking for his first goal. We did get Quentin Byfield with a big goal late in the game against Columbus, tying it up with the goalie pulled for the extra attacker. That great job the Kings did of keeping the puck in the Columbus end for over 2 minutes before Q finally gets the equalizer, and at least the Kings were able to get a point out of that loss against Columbus. So hopefully Quentin Byfield can get going as well. And Alex Laferriere had a really nice goal in that game against the Blue Jackets. Unfortunately, was erased on an offsides challenge. And even though it didn't officially count on the score sheet, a really nice play for Alex Laferriere, who, of course, started red hot, has cooled off of late. So hopefully he can get some confidence out of that goal, even though officially did not count or show up in his stats. Still waiting for Trevor Moore to show up. Has not had a goal since December the 7th when he had 2 in Minnesota. Just 6 goals so far on the season for Trevor Moore after a career high of 31 goals a year ago. If there was anyone on the LA Kings I could wish a goal for, it would be Trevor Moore, because they really need to get something out of him, and he could certainly help the struggling offense right now if he could get going. Some scoring from the blue line certainly is always helpful. Jordan Spence has kind of been circled of late as far as one of the defensemen who's really been helping out offensively. Had a goal the other day and has a couple of assists and looked really good in the game against Columbus with some quality shots on goal. So hopefully Jordan Spence can continue his upward trend offensively as well. Speaking of offensive-minded defensemen, Drew Doughty close to returning, and maybe he'll get some extra hockey as well. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll discuss that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Those of us who live here in Southern California, very lucky to live in a place where we can experience so many live events, sports, of course, but there's also theater events, concerts, and comedy shows to check out. And when you check them out, no matter where you go or where you live, you need to do what I do, and that is use Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. The all-in pricing feature shows you the total up front. There are no surprises at checkout. You can get a vantage point with a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and you'll get the lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, I mentioned it earlier. It appears that Kings future Hall of Fame defenseman Drew Doughty is very close to making his season debut after suffering that fractured ankle in the preseason. Remains to be seen where Jim Hiller will put Doughty in the lineup when he comes back, how much ice time he's going to get. But there's also a chance that Drew Doughty is not only returning to play for the LA Kings, but could play in the upcoming Four Nations Faceoff as well, representing Team Canada. That's a possibility because Vegas Golden Knights veteran defenseman Alex Pietrangelo has decided to pull out of the event, and that frees up a roster spot. He said he wants to rest up for the playoff push. There has been talk of Drew Doughty as being named as his replacement. Certainly, Doughty's stature as a future Hall of Famer and his international experience makes him an attractive candidate. But obviously, he hasn't played all year. There are other candidates who have. So you certainly think they would have the edge, possibly. So the next few games, whenever Drew Doughty does come back, certainly could be important for him personally to see if he does get picked to be the replacement for Alex Pietrangelo on Team Canada. Certainly, Drew Doughty has been very upfront and vocal that this is something that he wants to do. He's very, very proud to represent his country, and it's something that means a lot to him. I think for different players, it means different things. Some players are, very excited about it. Others are just like, okay. And some probably are like, I'd just rather have the rest, like Alex Pietrangelo. So for Drew Doughty, he wants to go. Whether he gets selected or not certainly remains to be seen. Obviously, if you're the brass of Team Canada, you want to see what he can do on the ice. But there's a limited number of games before this event gets going. So what they're going to see in a limited amount of time from Drew Doughty also is kind of an interesting little piece to the equation of him returning for the LA Kings. How is that ankle going to respond? What's his ice time like? So on and so forth. As for Drew Doughty, he was asked about it earlier today after the morning skate, and he said that pretty much he wants to play. He said, quote, "I don't want to break. I want to play." End quote, when he was asked about maybe coming back for a few games, then having a break, and then getting ready for the second half of the season. So again, not a surprise. He definitely wants to play for Team Canada. So a little bit of extra motivation for Drew Doughty when he comes back to play well and put on a good performance so that the people who are looking to replace Alex Pietrangelo will consider him. In the grand scheme of things, is that a great thing for the LA Kings? I don't know. I could see it going both ways. If he comes back and pushes it and maybe re-injures himself, then obviously that would be a very bad thing for the Kings. If it's something that motivates him even more to come back strong and really make an impact on the Kings roster and result that in him being on Team Canada, then it's possible it could be something that works out to be a positive for both Drew Doughty and the LA Kings. So remains to be seen. Again, that event is coming up here in mid-February. The Kings obviously on the road until then. They've got the game tonight in Detroit, 2 games coming up in Florida, then the game in Carolina. So there, not a lot of runway here for Drew Doughty to be able to show what he wants to do. So again, just another kind of layer in the cake as far as the return of Drew Doughty. Again, it doesn't look like he's going to play tonight. Could come back for one of those 2 games in Florida, but it is going to be soon for Drew Doughty. So a lot of interest in where he's going to be in the lineup, how much ice time he's going to play, how he looks for both the Kings and for Team Canada, and if he gets selected to be a replacement in the Four Nations Faceoff. So even more intrigue kind of surrounding Drew Doughty's return. I was asked on social media why the Kings wouldn't send Drew Doughty down to the Ontario Reign and let him get a few games in down there, kind of against some lesser competition before he joins the NHL club. Sometimes you see this with pitchers in baseball. They'll go down for like a rehab assignment in the minor leagues. Obviously, Drew Doughty is a player that you can't just send down because he's not waiver exempt. However, it's my understanding that the Kings could send him down, I believe, on a conditioning assignment for a few games if they chose to. Now, whether that was something that Drew Doughty would want to do or not, I think is probably unlikely. It does seem like players of a certain stature have a say in whether something like that happens, where if you're a younger player and you're waiver exempt, who cares? Yeah, send you down, get a couple of games in. But I don't think that's something that Drew Doughty would want to do or like to do. And I also saw somebody also pointed out on social media, sometimes you send veteran guys down, big name guys down to the minors, and then you've got guys looking to make a name for themselves by taking runs at those guys. So maybe that could play a factor in it as well. So certainly do not anticipate that. But it was a good question as to why maybe Drew Doughty wouldn't go to the minor leagues for a couple of games on a conditioning stint and then join the Kings. Then I think it also plays a factor that there's a limited number of games before the break. And I think Drew does want to make a good impression to possibly get selected for that Four Nations tournament. So a lot of things factoring in with Drew Doughty's return. As for the Four Nations face-off, it gets underway February 12th and runs through February the 20th. And if you're unaware, the NHL season hits the pause button. No Kings games over that time. Adrian Kempe currently is the only LA King selected to play in that event for Team Sweden. I will be crossing my fingers and toes that there are no injuries coming up in that event for any player, frankly, but especially for a guy like Adrian Kempe. That's the one downside. This event is interesting. It can be something positive for the NHL to see these great players on display playing for their countries. But the downside is likely somebody's going to get hurt. And that obviously is very difficult for whoever's team that is to have a player injured in an event that really, isn't a big deal for those individual teams. So hopefully everybody stays healthy, and in particular, Adrian Kempe. All right, game time for the Kings Red Wings game, 4:00 LA time. The Kings will be on the FanDuel Sports Network locally, Nationally, it's a NHL Network game, so not on ESPN Plus, and you can listen to the game on the 710 ESPN app. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, we will have a post-game show shortly after tonight's game in Detroit. We're going to recap the game. We're going to talk about which players showed up and hopefully talk about a Kings win. So again, Kings post-game edition, Kings versus Red Wings after tonight's game. We will have another post-game edition of Locked On LA Kings. If you want to stay interactive with the show, there are several ways to do it. You can send an email at any time if you want to get in on our fan feedback shows coming up every Friday. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com is the email address, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section as well. Love for you to stay interactive with the show by posting on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, getting you ready for tonight's game against the Red Wings. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you tonight with a post-game edition of Kings, Locked On LA Kings. So enjoy that. And as always, go Kings go.